My family disowned me. Now they're begging me to save their failing empire, and then I wiped the sweat off my forehead, the scent of oil and metal thick in the air as I tightened the last bolt on the frame. The shop was quiet except for the occasional hum of an engine in the background. Ben sat across from me, perched on the workbench, arms crossed as he sipped from his coffee like he had all the time in the world. "You hear about Emily and Nathan?" he asked, his tone too casual for something that was bound to be a mess. I didn't even look up. "What now?" Ben sighed, shaking his head. "They sold their house, packed up the kids, took their money, and hit the road. Said they were finally breaking free from the system." That made me pause. I set my wrench down and gave him a look. "You're kidding." "Wish I was." Emily had always been the dreamer of the family, always chasing some big idea of freedom. Nathan? He was no better. They had this whole plan about leaving the 9-to-5 grind behind, using the money from their house to fund a year of travel, hopping from city to city, living in cheap rentals, picking up odd jobs to stretch their savings. It sounded great in theory. How long did it last? I asked, already knowing the answer. Ben smirked. 2 months. They burned through their savings like it was nothing. Guess albums and eating out add up when you've got 2 kids to feed. I let out a low whistle. "So, what? They're coming back?" "Oh, they're back, all right. And they need a place to stay. Rent-free. For 10 months. I laughed, shaking my head. "No chance." Ben chuckled. "Figured you'd say that." An hour later, my phone buzzed. "Emily." Right on schedule. I ignored it at first, but the second call told me she wasn't giving up. Sighing, I grabbed my keys and headed out. Might as well get this conversation over with. When I walked into the house, Emily was sitting on the couch with Nathan beside her, looking exhausted. Their daughter, Sophia, was coloring at the table, while Max, their 5-year-old, was playing with a toy car on the floor. Our dad, Walter, stood near the fireplace, arms crossed. Vanessa and Ethan were off to the side, watching like they were waiting for a show. Emily's face lit up when she saw me. "Ryan, thanks for coming." I leaned against the doorframe. "What's going on?" Nathan cleared his throat. "Look, man, we hit a rough patch. The money didn't last as long as we thought. Prices were higher than expected. We were thinking maybe we could stay with you for a little while. Just 10 months, tops." I stared at them. 10 months? Emily nodded quickly. "We just need time to get back on our feet. We'll figure things out, maybe pick up some freelance work. It's just, hotels and rentals are expensive, and we don't want to sign a lease yet." I sighed, rubbing the back of my neck. "Emily, I love you, but I can't do this. My house isn't big enough for 4 extra people. And honestly, this was your choice. You knew what you were getting into." Her face fell. "Ryan, come on. You have space." "It's not about space. It's about the fact that I worked hard to have my own place, and I'm not turning it into a halfway house because you two made a reckless decision." Nathan clenched his jaw. "That's harsh." "What's harsh is dragging your kids into a situation you weren't prepared for." I shot back. "I get that you wanted an adventure, but you didn't plan for reality." "That's not on me." Emily's expression darkened. "You're so selfish. You never take risks, never step outside your comfort zone. Maybe you're just jealous we actually lived instead of wasting away in that garage of yours." I scoffed. "Yeah, real jealous. Living paycheck to paycheck, wondering where my next meal's coming from. Sounds like a dream." Vanessa, who had been silent until now, smirked. "Honestly, Ryan, you could be a little more understanding. Family helps family." I turned to her. "Funny. Didn't hear you say that when I was struggling to start my business, or when I needed help getting my first loan." Ethan crossed his arms. "This is different. They have kids." "Exactly. Which is why they should have thought this through before quitting everything." Walter finally spoke, his voice low and firm. "Ryan, you need to think about what it means to be part of this family. We don't turn our backs on each other." I looked at him, then at Emily and Nathan, and finally at the kids. They were innocent in all of this. But that didn't change the fact that this wasn't my problem to fix. "I'll help you find a rental," I said finally. "I'll even cover some of the costs for the next couple of months. But I'm not letting you live with me." Emily stood up, furious. "You know what? Fine. Keep your damn house. She stormed past me, grabbing her bag. Nathan followed, shaking his head. Guess we know where we stand. Vanessa sighed dramatically. You're making a mistake, Ryan. Ethan added, you'll regret this. I exhaled slowly, turning to Walter. Anything else? He shook his head, disappointment written all over his face. Just remember, son, money comes and goes. Family is forever. I didn't bother responding. I just walked out. As I stepped into the cold night air, I knew one thing for sure. I'd just become the villain of this story, and I was fine with that. I knew the moment I walked through the front doors of my parents' house that this wasn't just a casual family gathering. The air was thick with tension, like they had already decided my fate before I even stepped inside. The house looked the same as always, expensive but lifeless, like a showroom that no one actually lived in. A massive chandelier hung in the entryway, casting a cold glow over the polished floors. The furniture was pristine, untouched, like it existed only for decoration. Nothing about this place had warmth, no sign that a real family lived here. Walter stood by the fireplace, arms crossed, his jaw set tight. Ethan was on the couch in his usual business casual uniform, looking like he had just stepped out of a board meeting. Vanessa was next to him, scrolling through her phone, acting like she wasn't fully engaged. But I knew better. Derek, the youngest, was sprawled in a chair, pretending not to care, but his smirk gave him away. My mother sat off to the side, hands folded in her lap, looking like she wished she could be anywhere else. And then I saw it. A single chair, placed directly in the center of the room, facing them like I was on trial. I let out a short laugh. Wow, you guys really set this up, huh? Walter's expression didn't change. Sit down, Ryan. I didn't move. I'm good standing. Just tell me what this is about. Ethan leaned forward, fingers tapping against his knee. This is about the family name. About responsibility. Vanessa finally looked up from her phone just long enough to add, and about how you're embarrassing us. I shook my head, already done with this conversation. Oh, this again? Let me guess. My refusal to house Emily and Nathan is making me the villain of the family? Walter exhaled through his nose. It's more than that. You've been distancing yourself for years. First, you refused to work in the family business. Now, when your own sister needs you, you turn your back on her. I crossed my arms. No, I refused to clean up her mess. She made a reckless decision, and now she's looking for an easy way out. I offered to help her find a rental, even pay part of it for a couple of months. But that wasn't enough, was it? Vanessa scoffed. You always think you're better than us. I turned to her. No, I just refuse to be guilt-tripped into fixing other people's bad decisions. That's the difference. Walter stepped forward. Enough. We've come to a decision, Ryan. Ethan pulled out a folder and slid it across the coffee table toward me. Vanessa smirked like she had just won a game. Go ahead, Ethan said. Read it. I didn't have to. I already knew. They weren't asking for a conversation. They had already made up their minds. Vanessa tilted her head. You always wanted independence, right? Well, here it is. No inheritance. No ties to the business. You're officially cut off. Derek, ever the comedian, let out a low whistle. Damn, that's cold. I let out a slow breath, shaking my head in amusement. You guys really think this is some big punishment, huh? Walter folded his arms. This is for the good of the family. I picked up the pen and signed without hesitation. The room fell silent. They thought I would fight it. They thought I would beg or at least argue. Instead, I pushed the folder back across the table. There. Done. Vanessa blinked. That's it. Ethan frowned. You're not even going to try to defend yourself? I laughed. Defend myself from what? From being free of a family that only values money and reputation? You think this is some kind of loss for me? I gestured around the pristine, lifeless room. I've never wanted any of this. Walter's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. I turned toward the door. If we're done pretending this is an intervention, I've got a business to run. A real one. Built from the ground up. No handouts. No family name. Just hard work. No one stopped me as I walked out. I didn't look back. As I drove home, I realized something. I didn't feel anger. I didn't feel regret. I felt free. I got back to my workshop late that night. The familiar scent of oil and metal greeted me, a stark contrast to the sterile luxury of my parents' house. The hum of the fluorescent lights, the organized mess of tools, the partially finished bikes waiting for my attention. This was my real home. Ben was still there, working on one of the latest builds. He looked up as I walked in, wiping his hands on a rag. How'd it go? I tossed my keys onto the workbench. They disowned me. Ben raised an eyebrow. Like, officially? Yep, I said, grabbing a wrench and inspecting one of the frames. Signed the papers and everything. I'm no longer part of the Carter family. Ben let out a low whistle. Damn, you okay? I shrugged. Honestly? Yeah. They think they cut me off, but I'm the one who's been carrying them emotionally for years. They did me a favor. Ben smirked. So what now? I tightened a bolt on the frame. Now? Now, I focus on what actually matters. For the first time in my life, I wasn't tied to their expectations. I didn't hear from my family for months after they disowned me, and honestly, I didn't care. My workshop was thriving, orders were piling up, and I was too busy to waste time thinking about them. Ben and I worked late most nights, fine-tuning custom builds for high-end clients. My designs had started gaining attention in niche motorcycle communities, and word was spreading fast. More customers meant more opportunities, and soon, Josh, my operations manager, convinced me to expand our team. You need to hire more people, Josh said one afternoon, dropping a stack of invoices onto my workbench. Demand is outpacing supply. We either scale up or start turning people away. I grinned. Turning people away sounds easier. Josh rolled his eyes. I'm serious, Ryan. You're sitting on a goldmine here. We do this right. We won't just be a custom shop. We'll be a brand. I thought about that for a moment. I had always loved working with my hands, building machines from scratch, making something real. The idea of becoming a brand had never really appealed to me, but I couldn't deny the numbers. Fine, I said. Let's do it. We hired 2 new fabricators, upgraded our workshop, and streamlined production. Within weeks, we were moving at twice the speed, and the orders kept rolling in. Then the article dropped. Some journalist from an independent lifestyle magazine had been following my work for months and wrote a full feature about my company. The title? From Black Sheep to Industry Leader. How Ryan Built an Empire from the Ground Up. The article went viral overnight. Social media exploded. My inbox was flooded with emails, clients wanting custom orders, investors asking about partnerships, even a few offers from major brands looking to collaborate. That was the moment I knew everything had changed. And of course, right on cue, my family came crawling back. It started with a text from Vanessa. Vanessa, hey, we need to talk. Urgent. I ignored it. Then Ethan. Ethan. Ryan, let's meet. I think there's been a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding? That was funny. The last time we talked, he sat there with his perfect posture, watching me sign away my inheritance without a shred of emotion. Now, suddenly, there was a misunderstanding? I ignored him too. Then Derek. Derek, yo, you around? Stuff's happening. Classic. But the one that really caught my attention was from Walter. Walter, come home. We need you. That was the closest thing to an admission of weakness I'd ever get from him. Walter never asked for anything. He ordered, expected, demanded. The fact that he was reaching out meant one thing. They were in trouble. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I leaned back in my chair at the workshop, watching as Josh went over our newest batch of orders. Ben was adjusting the frame of a custom build for a high-profile client, and the shop was filled with the familiar sounds of metal on metal, the hum of machinery, the scent of oil and sweat. This was my world now, and they wanted back in. Hey Josh, I called out. Josh looked up from his laptop. What's up? I tossed my phone onto the table. Looks like my family's company is struggling. Think we should send them a thoughts and prayers card? Ben laughed. I'd pay to see that. Josh smirked. Let him sweat. They thought they didn't need you? Let's see how long that lasts. I agreed. So I let them twist in the wind. For a full week, I ignored every call, every text. I knew them too well. They weren't reaching out because they suddenly realized they missed me. They weren't calling to apologize. They needed something, and I wasn't about to make it easy for them. Then, one evening, I was in the workshop, working late, when my phone rang again. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Ryan. Ethan's voice came through, way too polite. We need to talk. I sighed. I got your texts. What do you want? There was a pause, just long enough to tell me he was trying to figure out the best way to phrase whatever plea he was about to make. It's about the business, he finally said. There it was. I leaned back against the workbench, smiling. The family business? You mean the same one I wasn't good enough to be part of? Ethan exhaled, like he was trying to be patient. Look, it's not a great time for us. The market's changed, and we didn't adapt fast enough. Sales are down. Dad's, well, he's too proud to admit we need help, but we do. I let his words hang in the air. I could hear the strain in his voice, the frustration of having to ask me, the black sheep, the outcast, the disappointment, for help. So let me get this straight, I said. You need me to come back and fix the mess you made? Ethan hesitated. We think you could bring something new to the table. I laughed. Right. Because you all respect my ideas so much. Ryan, Ethan said, his voice shifting into that condescending older brother tone he always used. Let's not dwell on the past. This is bigger than all of us. I shook my head. No, it's not. It's about you, Vanessa, Dad, and the fact that none of you have any idea how to adapt to a world that's moving faster than you are. Ethan tried to push back, but I cut him off. I'm busy, I said. If the business is struggling, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided I wasn't good enough to be part of the family. And with that, I hung up. That was satisfying. I had spent years being the outsider, the one they dismissed, the one they talked down to. Now, the roles had reversed, and I wasn't done yet. Vanessa made her next move a few days later, showing up at my workshop unannounced. I was in the middle of tuning a custom build when I saw her car pull into the lot. She stepped out in designer heels and sunglasses, looking completely out of place in an environment where grease and metal ruled. I met her at the door, not even bothering to hide my irritation. What are you doing here? I asked. She flashed one of her overly polished smiles. Ryan, we need to talk. I'm working, I said, crossing my arms. This won't take long, she insisted, stepping inside like she owned the place. She glanced around, obviously unimpressed by the workshop's organized chaos. So this is what you've been doing? Bikes? Yep, I said. She sighed. Look, things aren't great right now. The business is struggling, and Dad's not handling it well. Ethan's trying to keep things together. But we need you. That was the moment I knew for sure. I had one. Vanessa stood in the middle of my workshop, clearly uncomfortable. The scent of oil, the hum of machinery, the organized mess of tools. It wasn't her world. She belonged in luxury boutiques, not in a place where real work happened. I leaned against the workbench, arms crossed. You need me, I repeated, letting the words settle between us. Vanessa shifted on her heels, clearly hating that she had to say it out loud. Yes, she admitted. The company is in trouble. I wasn't going to make this easy for her. You mean the same company that I wasn't good enough to be part of? She exhaled sharply. Ryan, we made mistakes. Yeah, I said. You did. She looked frustrated. Can we skip the part where you punish us for it? We don't have time for that. I laughed. Oh, so now it's about time? That's interesting. Because when I was sitting in that room months ago, watching you and Ethan smirk while I signed away my inheritance, time didn't seem to be an issue. She had the decency to look guilty, but I wasn't buying it. Vanessa never felt guilt. She felt inconvenience. So what exactly do you think I can do? I asked. You've always been good with creative ideas, she said, her tone too sweet. And clearly, you're doing okay for yourself here. Okay. I raised an eyebrow. She realized her mistake immediately. I didn't mean it like that. I smirked. Sure you didn't. Vanessa sighed, rubbing her temples like this conversation was exhausting her. Ryan, listen. The market changed. We didn't adapt fast enough. The company's outdated, and customers are going elsewhere. Ethan and I have been trying to turn things around, but Dad refuses to modernize. He still thinks it's 30 years ago. And what worked then will work now.
It won't.
I nodded. Sounds rough. She narrowed her eyes. Ryan, I'm asking for your help. I stared at her, letting the silence drag. This was Vanessa, the same person who had once told me I was wasting my life. The same person who used to roll her eyes whenever I talked about my business. And now? Now she needed me. I should have said no. I should have told her to figure it out herself. But I didn't. Because I knew something she didn't. I had already won. I pushed off the workbench and looked her dead in the eye. If I come back, I take full control. She blinked. Full control? I nodded. That's the deal. No discussions. No compromises. I run it, and you, Ethan and Dad, you work under me. No special treatment. Vanessa almost laughed. Ryan, that's non-negotiable. I cut her off. You don't like it? Find someone else to fix your mess. She opened her mouth to argue, but I could see the wheels turning in her head. She knew they didn't have anyone else. Fine, she said, though the word tasted bitter in her mouth. I'll talk to Dad and Ethan. I nodded. Do that. The next day, Walter showed up at my workshop. He looked different, less composed, less in control. There was something in his eyes I had never seen before, uncertainty. He didn't waste time. Vanessa told me your conditions. I wiped my hands on a rag, not bothering to offer him a seat.
And
He exhaled slowly. That's a lot to ask, Ryan. No, I corrected him. What's a lot to ask is expecting me to clean up your mess while you and Ethan keep calling the shots. Walter's jaw tightened. He wasn't used to being challenged. You're asking me to hand over the company your mother and I built from nothing. I met his gaze. No, I'm asking you to hand over the company that's failing because none of you know how to change. If you want me to save it, you let me do it my way. Otherwise, don't waste my time. He was silent for a long time. Then, finally, he nodded. Fine. You have full control. I almost smiled. Almost. One condition, he added. Of course. I crossed my arms. Let's hear it. Walter straightened. The family name stays attached to the business. That's all we have left. I thought about it for a second. It wasn't an unreasonable request. I didn't care about the name either way. Deal, I said. And just like that, the company was mine. But if they thought I was going to let them sit back while I fixed everything, they were in for a rude awakening. The first thing I did after taking over was dismantle their entire hierarchy. Ethan had been running things like he was auditioning for some reality show about bad executives. His leadership style involved yelling at people when things went wrong and taking credit when things went right. That wasn't going to fly. I called a staff meeting. Every manager, department head, and key employee was there. Walter, Ethan, and Vanessa sat off to the side, watching like they were waiting for me to fail. I stood at the head of the table, arms crossed. Let's get one thing straight. The old way of doing things? Dead. This company is no longer run on nepotism. It's run on results. Some employees looked nervous. Others looked relieved. I pointed to the whiteboard behind me, where I had outlined a clear strategy. We're cutting unnecessary expenses. No more bloated budgets, no more outdated sales tactics. If you've had ideas buried under bureaucracy, now's the time to speak up. This is your chance to prove what you're capable of. One manager hesitated before raising a hand. What about the family? I smirked. They'll be held to the same standard as everyone else. No exceptions. Ethan scoffed but didn't say anything. Vanessa looked like she wanted to disappear. Derek, predictably, was half asleep. Then, I tackled the stores. Half of them were hemorrhaging money because they hadn't been updated in decades. The displays were outdated, the layouts made no sense, and the employees looked like they were waiting to be put out of their misery. I shut down the worst-performing locations immediately. Some employees were pissed, which I got, but I made sure they had severance packages and job placement assistance. This wasn't about punishing anyone. It was about survival. The remaining stores got full makeovers. Clean, modern showrooms with minimalist designs. No more desperate sales tactics, just quality products and a seamless experience. Then, I took the business online. Their website looked like it was built in 2005. Clunky navigation, blurry product images, the works. I scrapped the whole thing and hired a real development team. Within weeks, the new site was up, fast, mobile-friendly, and designed to make shopping effortless. And the results? Immediate. Sales started climbing. Online revenue skyrocketed. The best part? My family was realizing they weren't in charge anymore. For the first time in their lives, they had to answer to me. The first few months under my leadership were a storm of changes. Some employees resisted at first, especially the ones who had been coasting under my father's outdated management style. But as the numbers started climbing, even the skeptics shut up. For the first time in years, the company was actually making money instead of just coasting on reputation. Ethan, Vanessa, and Walter were struggling to adjust. Ethan was the worst. He tried to undermine me at every opportunity, pulling me aside after meetings to question my decisions. "Are you sure this is the right move?" he'd ask, his voice heavy with fake concern. "I mean, you're new to this level of management." I just smile. "You're welcome to step down if you don't think you can handle the changes." That usually shut him up. Vanessa, on the other hand, had stopped fighting me directly. Instead, she hovered in the background, watching, calculating. She was waiting for me to fail, waiting for a moment of weakness so she could step in and regain control. Derek? He was useless as ever. He showed up late, barely contributed, and spent more time on his phone than actually working. I eventually gave him a meaningless role, managing the company's social media accounts, just to keep him busy without giving him any real responsibility. But it didn't matter, because the company was thriving. Sales were up across the board. The modernized stores were bringing in younger customers, and the online platform was a game changer. Then came the Trade Expo. It was one of the biggest industry events of the year, an exclusive showcase where only the most innovative brands were invited. Before I took over, our company had never even been considered. This year, we were headlining. I designed the entire booth myself, a sleek, immersive experience that told the story of our transformation. We weren't just another luxury brand anymore. We were innovators. We were leaders. The reaction was overwhelming. Customers, journalists, and industry experts crowded around, amazed at how fast we had turned things around. Investors who had previously ignored us were suddenly interested. Competitors who had written us off were now paying close attention. I was the center of it all. For the first time, it wasn't Walter or Ethan shaking hands and giving speeches. It was me. And my family? They were just background characters in my success story. After the expo, we secured multiple new collaborations, including a partnership with one of the biggest names in fashion. Our products were going to be featured in a limited collection, something that would put us on a whole new level. And that's when it happened. The moment I had been waiting for. It was after a quarterly review meeting. The numbers were the best they had ever been. The board was thrilled, employees were motivated, and the future was brighter than ever. Walter cleared his throat. "Ryan," he said, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you. You've accomplished something that none of us could have done. You didn't just save the business, you made it better." The room went silent. Even Ethan and Vanessa looked stunned. Vanessa nodded slowly. "Dad's right. We should have seen your potential sooner. You've taken this company to places we never imagined possible." Ethan was the last to speak. His pride wouldn't let him admit it outright, but he gave a small nod. "You proved everyone wrong." I can admit that. There it was. The apology. The recognition. The moment I had dreamed about for years. But standing there, looking at them, I realized something. I didn't care. It didn't feel like a victory. It didn't feel like closure. It just felt like words. Because the truth was, they weren't proud of me because they had suddenly changed. They were proud of me because they had no choice. I leaned back in my chair, letting the silence stretch. Then, finally, I spoke. "I appreciate that," I said, my tone calm. "But let's be real. You didn't want me in the family until I was useful. That's not something I can forget." Vanessa looked away, clearly uncomfortable. Ethan frowned. "Come on, Ryan. We're family. We made mistakes, but we're trying to make things right." I shook my head. "No, you're trying to fix things because you don't have a choice. If this company had failed, you wouldn't be sitting here, telling me how proud you are." "Let's not rewrite history," Walter sighed. He wanted to argue, but he knew I was right. Here's the deal, I said, standing up and gathering my notes. I'll keep running the company. You'll all keep working your roles. But beyond that, we're fine where we are. No pretending we're a happy family. We tried that. It didn't work.